Okay, so today we pick up from where we left in the last class on Lucas's essay, The Ideology of Modernism. So Lucas was talking about Walter Benjamin's theory of allegory, and uh, Benjamin points out that every person, every object, every relationship can stand for something else. This transferability constitutes a devastating, though just, judgment on the profane world, which is thereby branded as a world where such things are of small importance. Benjamin knows, of course, that although details are transferable and thus insignificant, they are not banished from art altogether. So Benjamin suggested that allegory always meant a transference of the details, a transference of the significance of the details to something else. So whichever details are represented in a work of art, their significance is transferred to something else in allegory. And he says in his own way that it is a kind of a judgment on the profane world. Art is always a judgment on our world because art works by the process of selection, and though the details are transferable and therefore insignificant, they are not banished from art altogether. On the contrary, precisely in modern art with which he is ultimately concerned, descriptive detail is often an extraordinary sensuous, suggestive power. We think again of Kafka, but this, as we showed in the case of Musil, a writer who does not consciously aim at allegory, does not prevent the materiality of the world from undergoing permanent alteration, from becoming transferable and arbitrary. So, in the works of such modernist writers like Kafka and Musil, we find that there are a lot of details, and these details are supposed to have a significance, but this significance is kind of lost because of the allegorical transfer. And in the works of Kafka and Musil, even though a writer like Musil does not aim at allegory, but nevertheless this transformation happens, this alteration happens in his work too. Thus this modernist writers maintain is typical of their own apprehension of reality. So the way the modernist writers present reality, they claim it to be their apprehension of reality. The question is whether they apprehend reality or not. And Benjamin says that, the modernist writers maintain it is typical of their own apprehension of reality, and here is a debatable point. Benjamin suggested that details could be either individual or particularized or typical. But what we find in the writings of modernist writers, they are not typical in that sense. And therefore in their works, the reality is both exalted as well as depreciated. Exalted because it is created or it is transmuted into art, therefore it is exalted, but depreciated because it loses its true realistic character. For the conviction that phenomena are not ultimately transferable is rooted in a belief in the world's rationality and in man's ability to penetrate its secrets. So the whole argument here hangs on our understanding of the word transferable. So if we believe that reality has meaning, then we would assume that its significance is not transferable. That is, ultimately we will find some meaning behind the reality. But this assumption is based upon the understanding that we operate in a rational world and we can understand phenomena with our rationality. Modernist writers totally disregard or disbelieve this basic assumption that we operate in a rational world and phenomena have therefore meaning which can be understood rationally. But the conviction that phenomena are not ultimately transferable is rooted in a belief in the world's rationality and in man's ability to penetrate its secrets. In realistic literature, each descriptive detail is both individual and typical. Modern allegory and modernist ideology, however, deny the typical. So, two aspects of reality. One is that it is individual and therefore particularized. Another is that it is typical. Now, in this word typical, we have an understanding that this reality is representative of the truth of our being. That is why it is typical. But if the artist focuses only on individual and particularized reality, then that reality is not descriptive of or typical of our being, of our world. So according to Lukács, in modernist writing, even though there may be realistic details, these are particularized and individual and therefore they are not typical. Modernistic writing does away with this sense of the typical and therefore it cannot be taken as representative of any world. By destroying the coherence of the world, they reduce detail to the level of mere particularity. The connection between modernism and naturalism is plain. Why? Because naturalism focuses on the particulars. Realism, on the other hand, has a broader scope. But in modernist realism, according to Lukács, the focus is on the particular. Therefore, it is more like naturalism, and the typical is lost sight of. Detail in its allegorical transferability, though brought into a direct, is paradoxical connection with the transcendence to which it points. Modernist literature thus replaces concrete typicality with abstract particularity. Now notice the words that Lukács uses, concrete. So typicality is more concrete, it is more representative, particularity is abstract and therefore it is not representative of our world. We are here applying Benjamin's paradox directly to aesthetics and criticism and particularly to the aesthetics of modernism. So what is the paradox? The paradox is that even though in modernist writers we find a lot of realistic details, but in the allegory that they use, this transference does not lead to any significance. So this transference or the allegorical representation in modernist writings does not lead us to any meaning. So think of the world described by Kafka, for example. There are a lot of realistic details in his work. Therefore, there are a lot of particular, features which are focused by Kafka's art. But when we try to find some overall meaning out of his writing, we do not find one. So we imagine that there is an allegory here, but we cannot find any substance because of the lack of typicality. So these particularities do not lead to a representation of a typical human situation. So that is the paradox of which Benjamin speaks in his own poetic way, a much better way than that of Lukács, that it is exalted, it is an exaltation as well as depreciation of reality. Lukács tries to explain it in a more prosaic fashion. Though we have reversed his scale of values, we have not deviated from the course of his argument. Elsewhere he speaks out even more plainly. Though the Baroque mask had fallen, revealing the modernist skull underneath, allegory is left empty-handed. The forces of evil lurking in its depths owe their very existence to allegory. Evil is precisely the non-existence of that which allegory purports to represent. So beautiful expression or conceptualization by Benjamin. So Benjamin was examining Baroque play, German play of the Baroque period, and he used the metaphor of the mask and the facies hypocritus, the skull beneath the mask. So if we look at literature as an allegory, then in modernist literature we see the skull. So the Baroque literature was the face, but as the mask falls and we go below the surface, we see that, what do we see? We see that there is an absence of significance, and it is this absence or non-existence which makes it evil. So Benjamin says that the evil is the non-existence of that which allegory purports to represent. So allegory tries to take us from one significance to another significance by transference, but the destination significance, the significance where we would be led to, that significance is absent in modernist literature. Therefore it appears as evil in some sense. The paradox Benjamin arrives at, his investigation of the aesthetics of Baroque tragedy has culminated in negation of aesthetics, sheds a good deal of light on modernist literature and particularly on Kafka. So Lukács says that it is a negation of aesthetics, as if art itself appears to be negated because the proper function of allegory, taking us from one meaning to another, that itself is kind of absent, and we are we do not find this significance that it is supposed to lead us to. In interpreting his writings allegorically, I am not following Max Brod, who finds a specifically religious allegory. So again, the example here is of Kafka's writings, and Max Brod wrote a book on Kafka. He tried to give a religious significance to his works, but that significance was denied by Kafka himself. So I think we covered these aspects, and we are kind of repeating here. So let us go to his paragraph. It is a portrait of the bourgeois society Kafka knew, with a dash of Prague and local coloring, but it is also allegorical in that the doings of this bureaucracy and of those dependent on it, its important victims, are not concrete and realistic, but a reflection of that nothingness which governs existence. So basically, we should begin from here, the discussion of the castle. The supreme judges in the trial, the castle administrator in the castle, represent transcendence in Kafka's allegories, the transcendence of nothingness. So in Kafka's writings, the transference or going from one significance to another, which may also be called transcendence if it leads us to a higher level. In Kafka's writings, this transcendence leads us to nothingness. Everything points to them and they could give meaning to everything. Everybody believes in their existence. The officials, the bureaucrats in the trial and the castle, they are all pervading. People believe in them, but they can never see them. If there is a God here, it can only be the God of religious atheism, atheos absconditus. So we also discussed this. Extended next is to reveal the facies Hippocratica of the world. So the departed no God and annihilating nothingness. So these are the ways, facies Hippocratica, the skull, the skin. These are the ways by which Lukács tries to understand Kafka's work. That abstract particularity which is sought to be the aesthetic consequence of allegory reaches its high mark in Kafka. You have to remember the ideas of abstract potentiality and concrete potentiality. Here Lukács speaks about abstract particularity. So this particularity is opposed to typicality. The kind of typicality we assume in every realist literature, we do not find in Kafka, though there is the particularity. He is a marvelous observer. The spectral character of reality affects him so deeply that the simplest episodes have an oppressive nightmarish immediacy. So if there are a lot of realistic details and yet the whole thing is not real because it does not lead us to any meaning, then it has a nightmarish quality. An uncanny feeling is created in Kafka's work. It becomes spectral. As an artist, he is not content to evoke the surface of life. He is aware that individual detail must point to general significance. But how does he go about the business of abstraction? He has emptied everyday life of meaning by using the allegorical method. He has allowed detail to be annihilated by his transcendental nothingness. So Kafka uses a kind of allegorical writing and he expects his readers to arrive at some meaning behind the surface story. But there is no other meaning but that of nothingness. It prevents him from investing observed detail with typical significance. So this is Lukács's point, that in Kafka's work there is particularity but no typicality. Kafka is not able, in spite of his extraordinary evocative power, in spite of his unique sensibility, to achieve that fusion of the particular and the general, which is the essence of realistic art. His aim is to raise the individual detail in its immediate particularity without generalizing its content to the level of abstraction. So this abstraction does not lead us to any generalization, which should be the goal of all abstraction, that out of the abstraction one should arrive at some generalization. Kafka's method is typical here of modernism's allegorical approach. Specific subject matter and stylistic variation do not matter. What matters is the basic ideological determination of form and content. So this is the core Marxist, thought, the dialectical way in which Marxists think, that the relationship between form and content is a dialectical relationship, and out of that dialectical relationship one can find an ideological position by looking at that dialectical relationship. So, being a Marxist critic, Lukács would examine how the dialectical relationship between form and content is determined by ideology in the writers, and in case of modernist writers, excepting Thomas Mann, Lukács finds that authors like Joyce, Kafka and Musil, their ideology takes them away from arriving at any typical representation of the world. So even though technically they might represent realistic details, whether through stream of consciousness or through Kafka's realistic technique, but these realistic details, these particulars, they do not lead to any transcendental meaning, they lead us to nothingness. The particularity we find in Beckett and Joyce, in Musil and Benn, various as the treatment of it may be, is essentially of the same kind. So in these different modern authors, Lukács says that I am not saying that they have the same style of writing. They have different style of writing. They have different ways of treating reality. But essentially their ideology is the same. And this ideology of the modernist writers, like these writers, Lukács attempts to establish that its philosophical root is in Heidegger and Kierkegaard. If we combine what we have up to now discussed separately, we arrive at a consistent pattern. We see that modernism leads not only to the destruction of traditional literary forms, it leads to the destruction of literature as such. So, if we look at Beckett's plays, or here Lukács examines Beckett's novel Molloy, or if we look at the writings by Kafka, Reed, Musil, then we see that there is a kind of tendency towards dissolution of reality and consequently of dissolution of art, because ultimately plot, characterization, everything becomes less and less important in the world that Beckett or Kafka represent in their works. So not only the art forms tend to dissolve, but Lukács says that literature itself tends to disintegrate. And this is true not only of Joyce or the literature of expressionism and surrealism. It was not André Gide's ambition, for instance, to bring about a revolution in literary style. It was his philosophy that compelled him to abandon conventional forms. So André Gide abandons his forms, according to Lukács, because of his ideology, because of his philosophy. So in his novel Faux Monnayer, he presents the author who is trying to write a novel, but he finds it impossible to write this novel. Its structure suffered from a characteristically modernist schizophrenia. It was supposed to be written by the man who was also the hero of the novel. So how can the hero of the novel also be the author of the novel? So there is a kind of schizophrenia in this conception. So Reed can neither identify with the hero of the novel nor with the author of the novel. And how can this novel be written? And why does it happen to Reed? Lukács thinks that it is because of his philosophical conception, his ideology. And this schizophrenia is a result of a bourgeois capitalistic ideology where there is no particularly in modernistic literature, where all significance seems to be leading to a non-existence of things or nothingness. And in practice, Reed was forced to admit that no novel, no work of literature could be constructed in that way. We have here a practical demonstration that, as Benjamin showed in another context, modernism means not the enrichment but the negation of art. Okay, so Lukács ends his essay by some kind of allusion to Walter Benjamin once again. So if this essay was not by Lukács but by a research scholar, then we would have said that it is a faulty style of writing, because at the end of the essay the writer should assert his own views, but here he is quoting somebody else, or he is referring to somebody else's speech, Walter Benjamin. So we may say that in this essay Lukács finds himself in a kind of ideological trap where trying to explain or discuss modernism and modernistic writings, he finds a breach, or he finds two different kinds of modernists. One is the kind of Thomas Mann, and the other is the other writers, Kafka, Joyce, Reed, Beckett, and so on. And he thinks that this breach is because of ideological difference. And what is this difference? On the one hand, there is a belief in rationality and the ability of man to comprehend rationally, comprehend the world rationally, which is behind the philosophy of Thomas Mann, which we may say is a kind of a humanist and enlightenment, continuity of the humanist and enlightenment tradition of looking at the world rationally. But this worldview has been kind of fractured by the rise of Heidegger, Kierkegaard, and such philosophies that does not believe in the basic rationalistic assumption that man can understand the world, and therefore it leads to a kind of nihilism. So we may say that the crux of this essay is a debate between realism and nihilism. So the kind of nihilism expressed in the writings of Nietzsche, Heidegger, Kierkegaard, that does not allow one to believe in a realistic interpretation or any kind of significant interpretation of the novel or of any work of art. Okay, so we have finished the essay, and now we may go to the questions. If you have any question, you can ask. Where does Lukács find anti-realism in some of the modernist writers, discussed with reference to any one writer? So the very beginning of the essay, at the very beginning of the essay, the first sentence itself speaks about anti-realism, which of course it does not use again, but we may assume that his discussion of Musil, Kafka, Joyce, Beckett interprets their works as anti-realist. So here you have to discuss Lukács' discussion of any one of them, either Musil or Kafka or Joyce. Do you think Lukács' definition of realism is too narrow? Why can't he include Franz Kafka among the realists? So here the question is about the definition of realism. And for Lukács, realism only means the great tradition of realist writing among the bourgeois novelists, and even earlier than that, Lukács kind of brings in one tradition, Aeschylus, Homer, as well as 19th century writers like Balzac, Stendhal, Tolstoy, and so on. So this is the great tradition of realism, and this tradition begins to change as more and more emphasis is on form instead of on content. And this began with Flaubert, the emphasis on form rather than content, and with the modernist writers who experimented further with form, the novels became more and more dependent upon forms, modernist forms. And from a Marxist point of view, it is a decay, or it is going down. It is a downfall of the highest realist tradition. And then when Lukács comes to the modernist writers like Joyce and Kafka or Thomas Mann, he finds that these writers also use realism, but in a very special sense. So the realistic details in Kafka or in Joyce, according to Lukács, in case of Joyce, they are the productions of a particular psyche. They are the reflections in the mind of the hero, of a particular individual, and therefore this reflection of reality in somebody's mind, that cannot be called reality. And in the case of Kafka, though everything is described in great detail in realistic fashion, but no ultimate significance can be found, and therefore it adds to a sense of nightmarish quality, a kind of nightmarish quality to the novel, where things are real yet not real. Okay. So this kind of realism cannot be included in Lukács' definition of realism. And what is the foundation behind this difference or distinction between two types of reality? According to Lukács, the first kind of realism, the traditional realism, depends on the belief in the rational world view and man's capacity of understanding the world rationally. But the second kind of realism does not believe in altogether, because its philosophical foundation is some kind of nihilism, where man is either thrown into the world or there seems to be no immediate purpose of his life, and thus movements like expressionism, surrealism, they have more and more strengthened this view that the world is out of joint, that the world does not have a rational significance. Therefore, Lukács cannot include such realism or such realistic description, realistic style in his definition of realism, and therefore he cannot include Franz Kafka. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
What, according to Lukács, why does Lukács speak of different aesthetic intentions of James Joyce and Thomas Mann? So, in this essay, he speaks of the intention of the writer, the aesthetic intention of the writer. Now, there is no such literary or critical term as aesthetic intention, but this term is kind of philosophically motivated. Lukács says that a writer has an ambition or a particular goal in his work. So this is a kind of kind of a teleological understanding of art, that art has a particular goal. Every writer has a particular goal in his work. But the aesthetic intention of two modernist writers, James Joyce and Thomas Mann, according to Lukács, these are completely distinct and very different, very kind of opposed to one another. So what is the aesthetic intention of Thomas Mann? Lukács does not spell it out, but he refers to the Magic Mountain, not the Magic Mountain, House, which some of these novels of Thomas Mann, in which Mann tries to suggest that even though stream of consciousness technique is used at times, yet he suggests a particular significance in the world that he represents. Whereas James Joyce, who also uses stream of consciousness technique, there Joyce does not suggest that at the end or that the novel or that his art can be interpreted in such a way that it would lead to some significance. So according to Lukács, the world views or Weltanschauung of these two writers, they are opposed to one another. What philosophical foundation does he mention? So here we will have to talk about Lukács' discussion of Heidegger, Geworfenheit or thrownness into being, and Kierkegaard. These are the authors, philosophers that Lukács mentions. The literature of realism, aiming at a truthful reflection of reality, must demonstrate both the concrete and abstract potentialities of human beings in extreme situations of this kind. So this is a Hegelian concept that Lukács is using here, that history unfolds dialectically, in which there are many potentialities which are thrown up. Of these potentialities, some actually come into being and materialize in reality. These are concrete potentialities, and other numerous potentialities which do not materialize into reality, they are abstract potentialities. So ultimately, literature through its realistic depiction of the world presents a world which has some significance. So that is behind Hegel's philosophy. Hegel's philosophy of realism, and therefore Hegel's aesthetics is teleological. I am writing this word in the chat box. Teleological means that it has a telos or end. So the work of art has a goal. The goal is to represent reality or to bring out the significance of reality. Okay, we are looking at the questions. Now, Lukács brings into discussion the theories of concrete and abstract potentialities, and points out that in modernistic writing, what we see is that the writer does not throw up abstract potentialities, but the writer tends to believe that real life is made of abstract potentiality or abstraction. So abstraction becomes real to the writer. Therefore, it completely does away with concrete significance of reality. Right. So Therefore, in this expression or in this train of thought, Lukács points at the philosophical distinction between modernist writers who throw up only abstractions, abstract potentialities, and who cannot perceive any concrete potentiality. Why, according to Lukács, morbidity and psychopathology are hallmarks of modernism? So here you will have to talk about the ideas that Lukács brings into this essay about the journey into the psyche of the characters, which is an inward journey, and this journey leads one to the morbidity or to the psychopathology of the characters. And why so? Because in the modernist writers, they do not find any positive significance in the world because of their nihilistic philosophical basis of their writings. So Musil writes a novel, Man Without Qualities. The idea that there are no qualities, there is nothing concrete in our being, everything is abstract, and this lack of meaning in a post-Nietzsche world where there is no God, there is no reference to, there is no point which can be referred to as a source of meaning, and the absconding God, as which is a kind of nostalgia that Lukács says we find in the atheist religion. So atheism becomes a kind of religion, where even in the absence of God there is a desire for some God or some point of reference that will give meaning to our beings. So Lukács looks at it as a problem of ontological examination of our being as essentially meaningless, leading to the idea of nothingness. So we see more and more the exploitation of this idea of nothingness, the idea of nausea at the meaninglessness of the world in the existentialist philosophy of Sartre and others. And thus novelists who follow these modern philosophers, they tend to project a world where characters become more and more morbid because of the meaninglessness of their life. So according to Lukács, who is a Marxist critic, the capitalistic society produces some kind of a neurosis and schizophrenia, and this is reflected in the writings of the novelists, where there is a lot of psychopathology and morbidity. Where does Lukács comment that modernist literature tends to be naturalistic? So naturalism is a narrowing of the scope or narrowing of the focus on reality, and therefore one may see many details which is the context of which is lost sight of because of the narrow focus, and therefore these details become ultimately meaningless. So naturalism is a degradation of realism, and Lukács finds that modernist literature tends to become more and more naturalistic because its worldview is that of irrationality or nihilism, and therefore it cannot look at the world as a meaningful entity as in traditional realism. then Walter Benjamin's notion of allegory we discussed today. The two temporal planes in Thomas Mann's Dr. Faustus, that we also discussed. The time of narration and the narrative time. But even then in Thomas Mann there is this realism in the traditional sense. So Thomas Mann problematizes his art only by technique, but not philosophically. But other modernist writers, their art becomes philosophically problematic because it depends upon a sense of the lack of significance, a sense of the inability of man of arriving at any rational interpretation of the world. Right. So do you have any question on Lucas?
Not from my end, sir.
Okay. I suppose that you have more or less followed Lucas. It is not so difficult. Okay. But if you have any questions, you can ask me later.